User report and our agenda briefing. Mr. Burton, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Okay, first up is Kelly and Rhonda. They're going to go over kind of an update on where we are with our regional stormwater program.
Good morning, Kelly Hammer-Levy, Public Works Director, and I'd like to introduce Rhonda Bowman. Rhonda is there in the corner, and Rhonda is our section manager of our stormwater in the Capital Improvements Division, and if there's any detailed questions or you want to get into the nitty-gritty of something, she's here to walk us through those. So first I, want to just step back a little bit. We actually have used regional stormwater facilities for other purposes. For example, we have regional stormwater facilities for addressing water quality in Lake Tarpon and Lake Seminole. And again, the very specific purpose of those were to address water quality issues in those water bodies. But this concept of using regional stormwater, so it's not a new concept, but it's a relatively new concept for incentivizing redevelopment, and that's what we're talking about here. We have three focus areas: the Lillman CRA, which we've spoken about, the downtown Palm Harbor area, which we've spoken about, and then we've added a new one, is the airport and gateway, that we're going to go into a little bit. I think. We're done. Did we? There it goes. Where you pointed to. So again, just laying the context here for the Lillman CRA, we've got the yellow boundary, which is the CRA boundary. We have the kind of bluish green line. Those are watershed boundaries. We have two different watersheds in the Lillman CRA. To the north, we have Sawgrass Lake, and that water ultimately ends up in Tampa Bay. And to the south, we have Joe's Creek, and that water ultimately, after going through Joe's Creek, ends up in Cross Bayou and Boca Ciega Bay. We had this study looked at, the high priority, medium priority, and lower priority areas for where redevelopment would occur. So you're looking at that in the red, orange, and yellow respectively. And there up in the upper right corner is the Haynesworth Regional Stormwater Facility. And so again, just a little background on that facility, something we did present last year, so we're just going to keep it very high level. This was a facility constructed in 1997 in partnership with SwiftMud. The purpose of this facility was actually to provide treatment for county projects. So we used some of those credits. It was originally permitted for almost 123 acres of impervious. Today, it sits at that there's a little over 97 acres of impervious area for treatment still ready, still available. SwiftMud has been supportive of this concept to utilize this facility to help to benefit the Lillman CRA and redevelopment opportunities there. This one is pretty much ready to go. So if I'm going to back up again and look at that very large area there in red, especially. This is all area, including all of this up here, that is eligible, should a redevelopment occur, want to utilize this facility for treatment credits, they could. It's not mandatory. They can still use on-site treatment, but it's just another tool in the toolbox to help projects move forward. We've been coordinating with DRS on how this would be applied, and we've already actually set up accounts to process payments if somebody were to come in and want to utilize this tool in the toolbox. We developed a policy using a very standard calculation methodology used by other local governments. It comes out to just under $19,000 per impervious acre. Facility will provide most of the required nutrient treatment. Extensive redevelopment may require some additional on-site, and they will also have to attenuate, which means, kind of store and discharge that water things that they need that space for other purposes, and they can use this facility to meet their treatment requirement.
One of your statement, it was provides treatment only. Increased runoff may be required on site. So that still is a pond, right?
It can be a swale.
Okay.
Yes, it can be other things. So no, we don't need to have a pond. Lots of tools in the toolbox there.
Thank you.
But Kelly, also on that, if you have to, for instance, vault on site, the cost of that development, of that improvement is significant also.
Correct.
Far more than the $18,000 per acre.
Oh, yes,
Like
yes.
5 times more or more, so there's a real financial benefit, to having a regional stormwater facility. And I want to talk about that when we talk about, broader Pinellas County, because this not only enables them to maximize that, but there's a real cost benefit to redevelop.
Yeah, and in addition to the fact that some of the developments wouldn't occur if they had to provide on-site. It's just such tight, small property or lots, so yeah, it's a good tool.
Yeah, the CRA is very, this has been one of our challenges in trying to implement something like this within the CRA boundaries, because it is just so developed. And so having this facility already there and to be able to take advantage of this is really great for the community. I'm going to jump down to the south part of the CRA now and kind of talk about Joe's Creek. And we have a couple of challenges in this area. One, we want to provide the same incentives for redevelopment as far as treatment goes, but we also are having some significant flooding problems. And so I'm going to just highlight a couple of those issues here. In almost 80 years, obviously there's been some significant changes in this area of the county, but right here is a wetland, and now it's an industrial park. And so somehow, some way, at some point in time, an industrial park was put in a wetland. We are where we are. So we have to understand our history sometimes to understand our future and what we're battling against. So I just want to put some of that into context, that this is a very challenging situation. We have the Joe's Creek floodway, which is the red hatch line here going right through the industrial park, and then the entire area there is in the floodplain. So this has created a lot of challenges with regard to how we address flooding, and we also want to recognize that the solutions for each may be different.
Commissioner Long has a question.
Yes.
I do, Kelly, and I recognize that standing there as you are, you may not know the answer to this, but do you know when that industrial park went in there?
Rhonda, do you remember the exact date? No. And we can look back and get that to you if you're
Well,
curious
what
about
kind of an industrial park is it? I mean, what does that mean? What's in there?
It's the Joe's Creek Industrial Park. There's a lot of different businesses in there. Dairy Mix is in there, Kawa Coffee. There's a whole bunch of different types of businesses in there.
Old industrial warehouse structures that
Yeah.
some are traditional use and some have been kind of reconfigured for more modern day use.
But I heard you say it was a wetland, so I'm just really,
I am pretty
I am
sure if we go
stunned.
back, it's probably occurred long before there were any permitting requirements that would have.
Those buildings have
raised
been
red
there for a
flags.
long, they've been there, I think, my entire life.
Probably
So
just filled it in.
That's
I mean,
really,
so that's pretty long, right?
many other areas, they probably filled it in, and like all the fingers we have out in the water, they wouldn't occur today.
Yeah.
okay, well, I thought it was worth asking. Thank you.
All right, so again, I mentioned that we may be looking at, there are some projects that will hit both targets, and there are others that will really need to be focused. And so we have the Joe's Creek Greenway project, which you guys are very aware of. It's a project we received over $17 million in CDBG mitigation money for this project. It does include channel improvements, floodplain restoration, and structure upgrades, to enhance capacity there. Is it going to completely resolve the issues we're having? No, it is not. We do need additional storage. We need additional floodplain restoration. So those are things that we're looking at. On the treatment side of things, again, the Joe's Creek Greenway project will provide some benefits to water quality, but when we really started looking at the regional stormwater facility needs for the Joe's Creek area, the CRA, you're talking about almost 40 acres if we were to use a traditional system. And there just is not 40 acres in a highly urbanized community like this. So one of the ideas that we've been talking about is, again, looking at using an alum treatment facility. You're able to get a lot of nutrient load reduction, bang for the buck, on a much smaller footprint. I'm going to show one of those facilities just to walk you through it. We already have 6 of them. We operate them and maintain them now, so it's not something we're not used to. But I think it might help us get there sooner because we don't need the land that we would otherwise need using a traditional stormwater facility. So again, on the Joe's Creek portion of the CRA Regional Stormwater Facility next steps, we have run 38 different alternatives in the upstream segment that includes that industrial park. We're working on some cost benefit analysis, and that work will be done by the end of the year. The Joe's Creek Greenway design is getting kicked off, and the first part of that includes updating the watershed model that is going to, again, further help us look at these flooding issues and what the best tools in the toolbox are. On the treatment side of things, the site selection and acquisition for a facility is funded through ARPA. Talking about that, do we go with a traditional facility or an alum facility? And the example I am providing is, this is something we did back in, I think it was 2007 is when we constructed this facility. A partnership with the Department of Transportation. It's an existing DOT pond, and it treats an adjacent segment of US 19 only. And so this is the pre-aerial of the facility, and that's what it was designed for. It was only designed to handle a portion of US 19. The actual contributing basin area that kind of reaches that point is over 300 acres. Using a 1.5 acre pond on a 2.5 acre footprint, we're able to treat runoff from 98 acres. So you see the comparison of needing 40 acres using traditional treatment. We can get a lot of treatment out of a very small site. So we really feel that this might be a better fit for the Joe's Creek CRA treatment option. Just given, the challenges of location, and the size of the property that we could use.
Mr. Eggers has a question.
Yeah. So getting all of the runoff from individual properties to these sites, is that infrastructure that they have to provide? They have to tap into our infrastructure, right?
Basically, what we're doing is we're treating water that's currently not treated and creating almost like you've heard of wetland mitigation banks. It's kind of like that. We're treating an area that receives no treatment and it has a value. And then people can use that value on their project until it gets to zero. So they don't have to route any water to us or anything. That's the thing. We do need to, site a location where our existing drainage system feeds into, so that we pick the right site for the application. But this was a win-win for DOT and the county, and we have had a good working relationship over the years on this facility.
But your question is like the part that still has me a little questioning on it is the treatment part that you just described. I understand, but it's the actual water quantity. Like if I'm got a property and I've got a development, having that offsite at Sawgrass is great. I can buy an acre of credit or whatever volume of credit, but how does that still address the water that's actually on my property? That's where that doesn't
You're talking
change
just
the
about
site.
the attenuation, the temporary storage and release. Again, you just can't discharge more than what is coming off the site today, right? So it's a volume and how fast that water's leaving the property. So if you got a piece of property that's almost already 100% impervious or darn near close, and your new site's going to be about the same, you're really not talking about a significant increase in runoff coming into the public system. We just can't let the public system get overwhelmed, so you got to kind of slow it down before it comes in. But the existing impervious is so great in this area, there just won't be a lot of attenuation requirements.
So I'm thinking about the area on the south end of the industrial park that's backs up to the creek. That's where we hear the flooding and the stormwater. Without making improvements to their individual properties, where are we providing the relief on the creek or those 38 different sites plans that you looked at? Is that what we're talking about as far as providing more volume of runoff
Correct.
capacity.
Yeah, or that's where we're looking at handling additional volume. That's where we get floodplain restoration, storage. The Joe's Creek Greenway project is as planned, would also reduce stage elevations, the stormwater elevations as well. It's not going to, we know it's not going to resolve the problem in the industrial park, but it's certainly going to better it.
Okay.
Just to follow up, so if we have a large retail center with a large, paved parking lot that has no impervious area, and you're in this location where you have some credits, who determines how many of those credits you get? And if you don't have if you don't have that facility, then you do have to provide the on-site treatment, I'm assuming, and the on-site attenuation.
Correct. And just to be clear, this is not a requirement. We're not forcing this on anybody, saying if you're going to redevelop in the CRA, just like you discussed, an old 1970s shopping mall and they want to tear it down and build up something new. We're not telling them you have to use this facility. We're telling you here's this facility, here are some of the benefits to you. So when you're considering your design, if this is more economical for you, if this is better for your business plan, it's a tool for you to use. Otherwise, design standard and keep it on site. All right, so shifting over to downtown Palm Harbor, this facility was constructed in the early 2000s. This one is a little different in that it does provide attenuation and treatment for the downtown area. One of the items that we discussed before jumping into the Palm Harbor area was there were there wasn't there was a lot of assumptions about the facility, but it really wasn't documented well. So I asked staff to go back and take a look at it. Let's make sure our assumptions are correct, and so that we're stepping off from a good place. That assessment resulted in a realization that we needed to modify our state permit and to modify the pond's control structure, and that is expected to go to construction in September. So once that work is done, that facility, again, fully supports the original downtown boundaries. So what we're looking towards now is an expansion of that regional stormwater facility to support the historic Palm Harbor master plan, the form-based code implementation, and to add additional area that can be handled by a regional facility. And this is just, again, the drainage basin map. You can see the red hatched is the current regional drainage boundary, and then the dashed line on the outside is actually the form-based code boundary. So what the proposed facility expansion will provide for is approximately additional 17 acres outside the existing downtown redevelopment area for folks to use. Again, it's not required, but if they do want to maximize what they can put on that property, this would be a tool in their toolbox to use. The existing facility is up here, A, and the red is everything in red goes to A. The green would be our discharge to the Gulf right now. Our next steps with that, the map here shows Pond 2. This is our focus area. We're getting ready to kick off the survey and move into design and permitting, which is penny funded. Construction is proposed to be funded by ARPA. And as we're moving through this process, the credit system will be developed kind of in parallel so that it's online as soon as possible. Yes.
And that ponds will be used for the tool for properties within that area, private properties within that area. It's not going to be used for, if we change the design of a road, let's just say we're now collecting, curb and gutter. Is that going to be used up by some of the road work that we're?
No, this is explicitly being set aside for the redevelopment of Palm Harbor.
Great, thank you.
All right, and the last but not least is the airport and gateway area. So over, I don't know, maybe the last 6 to 8 months or so, getting a lot of, dialogue with Scott out at the airport. They have a lot of projects that they are doing out there at the airport. I know you guys have heard about those updates. They have stormwater requirements they need to meet. There's private development on the airport and outside the airport that has needs that need to be met. And then the challenge here is the FAA requirements. The FAA requirements for stormwater are very different and create a lot of challenges. So the whole point of this was, okay, what can we do to get ahead of all of this and plan for this, get it in place, again, so that the tool is ready for, in this case, both airport property improvements and private improvements. So we're developing that site screening to develop recommended alternatives. We have worked with the airport. The difference in here is there actually are a lot of county-owned properties and areas that we can, that we are evaluating. So it's not about going out and necessarily trying to find a private parcel. We're looking at how we can use what is in the area. And we're in the process of developing that ranking and scoring process, going to having the stakeholder meetings, and then, development of that recommended, priority list of areas that would achieve the goal. And then after that, we would propose to move into, if we're focusing on those county-owned parcels that provide that immediate benefit that we need, we could actually go right into preliminary engineering, or if we do need to acquire, then we would have those conversations. So this one is relatively new, but it was a really great opportunity given everything going on in this particular area of the county. And that is all I had.
Questions? On the airport, and you talked about the stricter federal regulations. Have we seen any new? There's been a lot of talk in, I don't want to say the environmental community, but in the community that cares about this, about potential new regulations as far as the plastics and the runoff from the fire extinguisher. I'm forgetting the chemical. But
PFAS, yeah.
Thank you. Have we heard anything actually formalized coming in as far as new treatment or attenuation that would be needed because there's so many airports that are on these kind of exact situations with runoff right in direct to water source. But I just didn't know if anything had been more formalized.
Not as far as the environmental resource permitting on stormwater, not yet. I know PFAS is it's a big topic at the state. I mean, we know there's going to be regulations coming down. I know utilities is very focusing on it very heavily because it does also impact their line of business. But I think we're all just kind of wait and see what's going to go on with that. Plastics and there's been conversations about plastics, but there's also been conversations about these emerging pollutants of concern that, like PFAS is one of them, but so are pharmaceuticals and other chemicals that are making it into our waterways, from various sources. So, but there's really hasn't been like a technical advisory committee set up to develop a rule yet or anything like that, but
Okay. Thank
we'll
you.
keep an eye on it.
Further questions? Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, so the treatment side of this that we're doing, presumably we're doing it because whether it's our bay, we have impaired water bodies, whether
Correct.
they're ponds or rivers, creeks, or the bay or the intercoastal. Do we have like pre and post kind of, we're monitoring these to see how we're doing on the water quality improvement of these quote unquote impaired water bodies?
Yeah, we're not doing like pre-post on like a stormwater pond, but yes, we have a very, very strong monitoring program in Tampa Bay, in our lakes and our streams, in the Anklet River. The only area we don't currently monitor is within the actual city of St. Petersburg itself because they have their own monitoring program, but we monitor for all the other cities, very collaborative with the estuary program, Hillsborough County Environmental Protection Commission, Manatee County as well. So we have a very, very robust monitoring network, and yes, we do monitor for those changes. What I think you had mentioned a question, I think at the last discussion about our surface water program, and we're working on getting that updated report, and I'll definitely get that to you as soon as that's done. But what we're seeing is, within the county itself, if you talk about the land, we're seeing those numbers go in all the directions that we want them to go. They're going down. It's like, yes, that's where we want to be. What we're seeing in like Clearwater Harbor and Boca Chica Bay, we're starting to see them go in the other direction. And we have a big study getting ready to kick off with all of our city partners in the Southwest Florida Water Management District to try to get a handle on that, because we don't want it to go too far where we're like the Indian River Lagoon and we have such massive seagrass die-off that we have manatees starving to death. We don't, we want to get ahead of this, understand the problem. We've had 2 red tides in a 5-year span. That was a significant impact to the environment. And the environment takes a long time to recover from an impact like that. I'm sure that is part of the equation, but there are some other things going on as well that we need to understand better, and how we might get a handle on those to make sure that our systems stay in very healthy condition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Burton.
Next up, we've got an update on the trail users report. And Paul's on his way up, and you had asked about several different types of uses of the trail and different types of bikes, and so this is an update on all the things associated.
Good
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Paul Kazi, Parks and Conservation Resources Director. Presenting with me this morning will be Whit Blanton, Executive Director of Ford Pinellas, and Joan Rice, Transportation and Traffic Engineer with our Public Works Department. So just starting with a little background, for the purposes of our discussion this morning, when I refer to the Pinellas Trail, that includes not only the Fred Marquis Pinellas Trail, but also that portion of the Coast to Coast Trail and the Duke Energy Trail that the county manages. While the trail is best known as a recreational amenity, it's much more than that. It's an alternative transportation corridor. It's a very large stormwater conveyance system. It's a greenway. It's a neighbor to thousands of homes along the length of the trail. There are currently 67 miles of trail, and when it's with an additional 7 miles to be built out, we'll have just under 75 miles of trail. Because of the size and the services that are required to manage the trail, there's several departments that have a role in the management of the trail. That includes the County Public Works Department, the Parks and Conservation Resources Department, and Forward Pinellas, along with the support of several of our municipalities that the trail runs through. So as far as who does what, the Public Works Department has responsibility for the surface or pavement, as well as ditch maintenance, the signage, capital construction projects, and maintenance and construction of bridges and overpasses. My department, Parks and Conservation Resources, handles trail volunteers. We work with the Friends of the Pinellas Trail. We have rangers that patrol and do rules enforcement. However, lawful enforcement is done by our municipal enforcement agencies, police departments, and the Pinellas County Sheriff. We maintain the 911 or 911 safety markers along the trail. Those are those indicators on the trail that help people report issues, or if they need emergency help, they can refer to those numbers, and their law enforcement or EMS is easily dispatched to that site. We also are responsible for trash and litter, as well as the mowing along the trail.
Could I ask a quick question, just while I have you here? I've been out and about on Belcher Road and County Road 1. Frankly, very embarrassing about the height of some of the medians that we've had issues with. I mean, probably as high as the window in your car. And so I know we talked about that at a previous meeting, about the problems that we're having with contract. Could you just maybe speak to that, just so that folks that may be watching on a different topic?
Yeah, actually, while we used to maintain the medians. That was probably about 7 years ago. The maintenance of the medians is now done by the Public Works Department and/or their contractors.
So that's Kelly.
She's already left.
We can try to catch her in the parking lot, but, yeah.
What's that?
Go ahead and speak to it, Joe.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jill Silverboard. The Public Works Department is currently doing a review of all of our contract services versus the ones we do in-house. As you may recall, we're only resourced to do 11 mowings per year. So yeah, this time of year, things start getting pretty scraggly and tall. But they're mapping that out to see if we can gain some efficiencies between, you know, we don't want to be repeating or driving past the median that we're maintaining, you know, when the contractor is maintaining the next one over. So we're trying to map it all out and review it. And then we can make better informed level of service recommendations because
My understanding was that we were having trouble with our contracts.
We are.
And that's the issue, because this is not rain at this time of the year growth. I mean, I've seen that before. It's probably the height of this, but not the height up here, and it's really horrible. So I just want to be able to explain to people why we're having the problem and how soon we think we can take care of it, the issue.
Okay, I will get you a full response on that, Barry. That is correct. We are having issues with contractual services.
Thank you.
Probably a variety of reasons, but I'll get
You know, it used to be to try to gain efficiency, you outsource stuff and you put that in private contracts because they could hit it, and you know. But now we're having a problem with them being able to hire people too, and so it's so you know. Do we bring it back in house? Well, we're having the same hiring issues, and so anyway. But you raised it. I did raise it back to them, and she'll get us a report. But it's a problem.
Thanks.
So as far as our other partner, Force Forward Pinellas, they provide planning support. They handle both the Trail Security Task Force and the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee and collect attendance and visitation data. The trail itself, unprecedented user numbers, over 2 million visitors per year. It's not only something that draws people from throughout the county, but also it's become a tourist destination as well. But there are relatively limited trail opportunities for the size of our population. NRPA statistics states that the median number of miles of trail for a community of our size would be roughly 91 to 100 miles of trail that would be under the county management. So with that number of visitors and participants, of course, there's going to be issues. Experience versus expectation, and that's really what we want to talk about today. Issues dealing with trail courtesy, issues dealing with speeding on the trail, as well as the general rule of users keep right. When the trail was first developed, the pedestrians and the cyclists were separated on the trail, leaving roughly 5 feet of a 15-foot wide trail to pedestrians and the other 10 feet for bicyclists. Over the years, based on the type of activity that goes on the trail, the number of users, we've gone with the standard keep right except to pass. And also, something that's probably was never envisioned 30 years ago, but e-bikes and micromobility devices have become a major component of trail participation. So to start getting in, yes, sir.
Thank you. The rule of thumb, and do we have signage for this? Like, so if I'm heading south and I'm walking, I stay to the right. If I'm heading north and I'm walking, I stay to the right. So, because what we have is a lot of confrontations between bicyclists and I'm pointing to Whit only because he brought a bicycle today, sorry. But confrontation sometimes between walkers and bicyclists, because walkers are supposed to stay to the right, bicyclists on, so now we've changed that. Is that
It's been changing over several years, yes. Now, and of course, if you follow any of the social media, Friends of Pinellas Trail, things like that, you're going to hear people talk about, why don't we remove the there's old markings on the trail that show pedestrians on this side and cyclists on the other side. But that's not the way that people generally use trails, and when you have people that are coming from other areas, or, if you're driving your car, you're taught, stay right except to pass, and that's the same rule that.
Well, I think we need to do a better job of letting folks know, because it may be more culturally morphing, but between the walkers and the bikers and as you said, the mechanical or the other devices that are out there, I mean, it's not what you're saying, because I mean, in practice, it's all over the place. And people, they'll walk arm in arm almost the whole trail. That just in certain parts, of course.
And that was part of the Trail Courtesy Campaign. One of the components of that was keep right except to pass. But I use the trail.
Yeah.
I see it. You got the dog walker, and 6 foot of leash hanging out there, and people who want to use the trail and talk as they walk. Of course, they're not going to go in single file. So certainly, unfortunately, that's one of the consequences of the success. There's so many people using it for so many different purposes, and they're not really cognizant of other users.
I was just whatever we can do to minimize the confrontations. That's where we get some of these get kind of nasty. So,
Yes, they do.
thanks.
I'm going to turn it over now to Whit Blanton, who's going to talk about the speeding issue as well as the e-bike and micromobility devices.
Good morning. Whit Blanton, the Ford Pinellas. As Paul mentioned, we've noted these issues. We hear about them through not just social media, but through our committees. And so we began a trail speed study earlier this year, really, in the spring. And we have a combination of physical counters out there that use infrared cameras to count not only the users, but it also collects speed data, which we didn't know until we did this study. And we also did field observations, 10 hours of field observations at the busiest parts of the trail. And we really wanted to look at how common is the speeding issue, how many people are speeding, is it a large number, and what can we identify from that? What we really found is that there's very low incidence of speeding, and that could be because 20 miles an hour is pretty hard to maintain for most people. Even with an electric bike, we don't see much speeding. The e-bike speeding is less than 1% of all bicyclists, and only about 5 to 10% of all speeding bicyclists. So the people who are speeding tend to be the road bike users who probably need to be on the highway or the road and not on the trail because they can go 25, 30 miles an hour pretty consistently. So it is really more of a perception issue, as we've noted in our study, because the largest speed bands are 0 to 5 miles an hour, which is about 3 miles an hour is the speed of people walking, and then bicyclists about 11 to 15. And if you think about it, if you're walking along at 3 miles an hour and somebody comes by at 11 to 15, and they don't give you a warning or any kind of bell or anything like that, that can be a little jarring. So our field work, just to identify, we did it starting in December and carried it through the spring, which are really busy times for the trail. We chose these areas, higher use, where we observed higher speeding rates through the counters. We borrowed the Public Works Department speed guns and were able to match and verify that the counters were working effectively to collect speed data. And this is a map showing where all the counter locations are, and it also shows the volume of users by location. So Dunedin, Palm Harbor are really two of the heaviest trail usage areas. Bay Pines is also a pretty popular one. And I think with the new segment completed, you'll see more usage in other parts of the county. We're in the process of acquiring and deploying new counters that will now count the Duke Energy Trail in places. So we had 543 measurements, only about 5,000 of those were exceeding 20 miles per hour. That's about a 1% speeding rate, so it's a really low percentage, but there are outliers, and there are the occasional obnoxious person who tries to speed in an area where clearly they're creating some issues. But it's such a small percentage. The highest percentage was in the East Lake area where it's pretty wide open and there's not a lot of conflict, so people maybe feel more comfortable that they can get up to and sustain a pretty high speed there. In Dunedin, where you have the most conflicts, it was only about 0.5% of people speeding, probably because it's difficult to do so, just like it's hard to go 50 miles an hour on Gulf to Bay at certain times of the day. State statute has really been a bit of a game changer for how we use trails and roadways throughout the state of Florida. In 2020, the state passed a new bill covering e-bikes and micromobility devices. It's a little hard to read at this scale, but in your packet, you can probably see the chart better. I want to direct your attention to those three middle columns. What the state statute did is it defined classifications of e-bikes or electric bikes and micromobility devices. And there's a class 1, which is pedal assist. The motor does not exceed 20 miles an hour, so you might go faster than 20, but you're going to be going downhill with momentum. The motor stops at 20. Class 2 is a throttle assist bike or a throttle only bike, and that can get you up to 28 miles an hour or so, and you do not have to pedal for a Class 2 bike. For a Class 3, it's also pedal assist, but the motor and the speed gets you up to about 28 miles an hour. I have a Class 1 e-bike, which is right over there. It looks like a regular bicycle. I rode it into work today. I use it pretty often on the trail, but I'm careful not to go over 20 miles an hour. The local governments, according to the state law, have discretion at setting their own rules that could be more stringent than state statute, but what the state statute does is it gives everybody a level playing field as a framework and a basis for considering any additional ordinances.
What are the typical costs of the different electric bikes?
They vary in price. You can get a pretty good electric bike for a little over $1,000, $1,200. Getting below that, it might be kind of sketchy. The better e-bikes tend to run closer to $2,500, $3,000, and you can spend a lot more than that. An e-cargo bike, for instance,
I'm looking at a Ford or Chevy, not a Lamborghini. What that's kind of what the average.
I think you'd be looking at about $1,500.
Okay.
Yeah. So e-bike user growth is through the roof. There were more than 880,000 e-bikes sold in 2021, which was double the number of e-bikes sold in 2020. And electric cars and trucks were only about 608,000, so it's a faster growth rate than electric cars, and it's also more sales than electric cars. And e-bikes saw a 240% growth in sales last year. It's the fastest growing market segment of bicycle sales. Any kind of road bike or mountain bike or anything like that, e-bikes by far and away are the fastest growing market. And as Paul mentioned, our trail counters, we've exceeded 2 million trail users for the last several years. The e-bikes represented a little over 13% based on our count data. So it's interesting that a lot of communities are beginning to encourage e-bikes as a transportation alternative and a clean energy alternative. I pulled a couple of examples. Denver, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. all do this. Denver is offering rebates for regular bikes of $400 and $1,200 for cargo e-bikes. They have an e-bike lending library, and then all of these local governments that I mentioned, or the state of Massachusetts, offer grants for low-income and disadvantaged areas. And it's a recognition, I think, that there is a transportation solution somewhere in here with electric bikes. I know I use mine to commute to work. I won't promise that in August, but I don't really even sweat on a 7.5 mile commute, 25 minutes. Not in August. I sweated a little bit this morning, but it makes it a very pleasant, easy commute. You can use that throttle to really manage not only your speed. I can get here a lot more quickly, but also just my energy level is a lot less for whatever hills I may encounter. There are some regulations in place in Pinellas County already on e-bikes. Really started with the city of St. Petersburg with their e-bike rental program. But then a number of the beach communities have had concerns about e-bike rentals on the beach. And so several of our beach communities have banned e-bikes from riding on the sand. And I know a couple of cities, I believe it was St. Pete Beach and Madeira Beach, have passed resolutions that also restrict e-bikes from local sidewalks. And there's a reason for that. An e-bike can go faster, and while people may perceive safety on the sidewalk, you are less visible to motorists pulling in and out of driveways. And we had a fatality in Madeira Beach in January of 2021, a woman riding an e-bike on the sidewalk in opposite traffic, and a truck pulled out of a parking lot and hit her and killed her. And she couldn't see the truck couldn't see her because of a building in the way. So we do encourage people generally to ride in the street, and hopefully there's a bike lane for you. But because of that safety issue, a number of local governments have started to restrict them from the sidewalks where there's more pedestrian activity. And if you think about downtown St. Petersburg on Central Avenue, for instance, they restrict bikes from the sidewalk. It doesn't mean they don't sometimes ride there, but they've tried to build out their on-street infrastructure to keep people off the sidewalks where there's more dining and more people walking.
What, Dunedin, what does that mean, micromobility? What's that
What does
regulation?
micromobility mean?
Well, how, as far as regulatory, Dunedin treats e-bikes that way.
Let's see, their restriction is pretty minimal. They just classify it and acknowledge that they're there. They have corrals for scooters where you can park. So micromobility tends to be these electric scooters and similar type devices.
They like their microbreweries there, so they add micro to anything that for branding purposes.
So if you're drinking, you can ride it anywhere? Is that how it is in Dunedin?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
I'm going to turn it over to Joan to talk about the survey that just was completed.
Thank you, Whit. Pinellas County conducted a 3-week online survey in April of this year. Over 2,000 people told us what they thought about electric bicycles in Pinellas County. Information about the survey was promoted by local news outlets, on social media, the county website, and for 2 days, we handed out cards at locations along the Pinellas Trail with information on where to find the online survey. The graphic that you see on the left there is one of the signs that we used at one of those in-person events. So of the 2,000 people that participated in the survey, 52% used traditional bicycles, 20% use e-bikes only, 19% use both traditional and e-bikes, and then 9% of the survey participants were non-bike users. 52% of the responses were male and 47% were female. 91% live in Pinellas County, 7% live somewhere else in the state of Florida, and 2% live out of state. So we asked separate questions of just the e-bike users. 91% of them own their own e-bike, and the remaining either rent or borrow. 75% have owned their e-bike for 2 years or less. 51% of the e-bikes weigh more than 50 pounds. And then we asked them why they own an e-bike, and the answers in order are for health or disability reasons, to go farther, purely for fun, as a clean energy alternative to driving, running errands, more efficient trips, and commuting. We also asked separate questions of the non-bike e-bike user, and this would include those that are traditional bicyclists as well as pedestrians. 26% have ridden an e-bike in the past, and 18% are actually thinking about buying an e-bike. And 71% said that they would buy an e-bike if they had a physical limitation. But 80% of them do have safety concerns about e-bikes. And their top 5 concerns are the speed of the e-bikes. The e-bike users are reckless and dangerous, and they don't follow the rules, and the lack of courtesy. E-bikes are beyond the physical ability of the user, the e-bike weight, the size, and the lack of sound. And also, e-bikes need to be on their own facility or in the road. A little bit more about the survey participants. This chart shows the age of the survey participants participants, separating them by decade. The largest age group of the survey participants is 61 to 70-year-olds at over 1/3 of the total. And the age group also has the largest number of e-bike users. And the second largest group is the 51 to 60-year-olds and the second largest number of e-bike users. Now looking at some of the differences between the traditional bike user and the e-bike user. When asked where they ride, a higher percentage of the traditional bikers only ride on the trails. And as compared to the e-bike users, not only ride on the trails, but also on a mix of the roads. As for the number of miles ridden in a week, more of the traditional bike users travel more than 40 miles an hour, 40 miles a week. The e-bike user rides more in the 10 to 20 and 20 to 30 mile a week categories. So with those safety concerns that the non-e-bike user had, we asked all of the participants about their speed, the courtesy and obeying signs on the Pinellas Trail. And most riders feel they ride in the 10 to 15 mile per hour range. They make a strong effort to exhibit courteous behavior and do obey the signage. Those that don't obey the signage say that they roll through stop signs and signalize intersections when no vehicles are present. So although non-e-bike users have concerns, e-bike users feel they are safe and respectful. So we asked if we offered, would they take an online 15-minute voluntary safety courtesy class from their home computer regarding trail use. And 91% of the traditional bike users would take the class, and 72% of the e-bike users would also take the class. Some of the traditional users actually suggested that this would be mandatory for e-bike rental. So just a quick update on the Pinellas Trail loop. As of last Friday, we now have 67 miles completed on the loop with the opening of the North Gap. The bridge on the upper corner is the bridge over Lake Tarpon Canal. That will start construction next year. Then in the middle of the graph, where it says trail design, that's actually between Haynes Bayshore and 126th Avenue. That is going into design. And the remaining pieces are in planning. So when it's done, we'll have about 75 miles.
What's a typical overpass cost when we're doing an overpass over a trail overpass over a road, ballpark?
It kind of depends on how many lanes of the traffic, but it could be $6 to $10 million.
Okay.
Okay. Some could be as low as 3. I mean, it's quite a range.
Okay.
Depending on the number and utilities. There's just so many.
Sure. Just wanted a ballpark.
Yeah. So next steps. We just want to make sure everyone understands the trails are for everyone, for the cyclists, the pedestrians, the e-bike users, and micromobility. And that was actually stressed in our courtesy campaign that you can see the poster that's on the one side. And we want to emphasize, just as Paul said, keep right, except to pass. Yes, we do need to get new pavement markings put out there. All of the signage that had the little picture of the pedestrian on one side and the bicycles on the other, those signs are all coming down. We would like to also put up the sign that you see on the right side of your screen where it says no unauthorized motor vehicles. Right now it says no motorized vehicles, and it's confusing to some people. There's a placard at the bottom that actually shows that ADA, electric bikes, scooters, and segways are all permitted on the trail with the Florida statute written on there. So other things, we'd like to continue the courtesy campaign. We talked about that little class we asked about. We're going to work on that, and then also that new trail signage. So with that ends our presentation. Thank you very much for listening to us. If you have questions, please let me know.
Further questions? Commissioner Gerard.
So are these posters on the left something that we can do on the trail itself? What do we have, or what are we planning to put up there to let people know they should be staying to the right and kind of slow down when there are pedestrians, so you don't scare the heck out of them?
Yes. Well, during the campaign itself, we had separate posters. There's 8 there, so there were 8 separate posters, and we had them on yard signs and put them along the whole trail. These posters are now being put in shops that are located near the trail to kind of remind people. And we're also looking at the possibility of doing some wayfinding signage along the trail and incorporating some of these graphics in it. Other places you can see it is on our website. And then if there are any kind of special events going on, like downtown Dunedin or whatever, we will bring some of those signs out there as well.
I think it would be nice to have some very basic permanent signs out there,
Yes.
you know.
And it'd be great to have that with our wayfinding system, so that it would be along the entire loop.
Right.
Further, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, so I'm struggling with this. I mean, I hear what you guys are saying. So I'm thinking of people that are walking and they're on the outside. They're going in different directions, so they're on the outsides, and up come the bikes on the right, and they see people, so they're going to pass. They're going to pass into the side where people are walking the other way, and potentially coming their way as well. So that's the first question. I just think there's a lot of, I mean, trust me, people really do take to heart that this side is for bikes and this side is for walking. So the change is a big change. So I'm obviously a little bit concerned about that. And then there are parts of the trail where you have the main walkway, and then you have a little piece separated by grass. I'm assuming in those areas that the pedestrians will still go to the right, but I don't know what that means. How does that translate when you get to that area? I just think this change is very confusing. It is, I mean, to me, and I think in practice it's going to be too, because there'll be people yelling at each other. Now the new rules say this, and it's like, it's just, I think we have to be very, maybe some observation and watch it, because I think we're going to have some issues. But
We definitely will continue to watch. The keep right philosophy is used in lots of trails, not just here or in the state of Florida, but nationwide. We do have those segments where the pedestrian area splits off to one side. Until those areas are resurfaced and the grass is removed and it becomes the same width trail everywhere, we would suggest that the pedestrians still use that, but still keep right. So there would be the two-way traffic on the little piece as well as the two-way traffic on the larger piece for the bicyclists. But just like in a two-lane roadway, if you're passing somebody and you've got oncoming traffic, you need to slow and wait your turn and then go around. So there's definitely courtesy. You have to realize that the trails are for everyone and it's not just for the bicycle.
So when I saw this topic pop on the calendar, I mean, I kind of was hearing some rumblings. I thought we'd have a lot more difference of opinion on the electric bikes, but it seems that pretty well accepted and embraced.
It's embraced, but just like there are some pedestrians that are upset with the traditional bike rider that flies by them and doesn't have the courtesy to warn them that they're passing, the same thing is happening with any user, including the traditional biker that gets an e-bike that flies by. Their biggest concern is they're going so fast and they're not letting me know that they're passing me. And they're so quiet on that electric bike that I don't even hear them coming. Then there's the problem that if they do run into me, they're so heavy that 50-pound bike is going to do a lot more damage than a traditional bike. So those are the concerns they have, and we need to make sure that there is an educational component out there so that everybody understands that, yes, everybody's allowed to use the trail, but we all have to follow these rules.
No, I mean, from the folks that I know that do have them, it has really opened access to the trail. Some folks that with knee or back, or health issues, to be able to use that to get up the ramps on the overpasses, that's a significant barrier removed. Folks that live in far west St. Pete or Seminole, they're now going all the way downtown St. Pete with just getting a little assistance on the electric to take a little of the, so I mean, that part I hear all the positives. And yeah, I follow some of the trail Facebook pages and like any social media, the comments vary in their kindness and courtesy. But no, I mean, I think the survey was very interesting and actually overwhelming in one direction, so.
Oh, but
Yes, ma'am.
since only 9% of the people that responded were non-bicyclists,
Yes.
we didn't hear a whole lot from those people that are walking and having either regular bikes or e-bikes come up behind them and miss them by that much.
Right, right. You are correct. I mean, when Whit presented his information about the speed study and also how many trail users are out there, depending on the segment going around the loop, there are some places that are, up to 25% are pedestrians. So I don't know why the pedestrians didn't choose to do the survey as much as the bicyclists did.
And it sounds like a jerk on a regular bike and a jerk on an e-bike are both jerks, is what it sounded like.
Okay.
Further questions?
Yeah, so Joan, when can I tell the golf cart people that there's going to be room on the
Oh,
trail?
Lord.
I'm kidding.
Commissioner Eggers, that
but
won't
I do have
happen.
a lot of people that ask, right? So because it's like, how do we connect with the communities? And I said, well, they're really designed to stay within your community, not to connect between
That's
communities.
deggers@pinellascounty.org.
Yeah.
Further
Thanks,
questions?
thanks.
That's not, okay, we're not concerned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Whit and Paul. All right, rolling right along.
Sorry. Moving on to the agenda. We can pull that out. All right, obviously you have items from clerk of the circuit court, reports for filing, miscellaneous items for filing. We have administrative services, claims, and receipt for filing, county attorney, receipt and filing for lawsuits. Starting with item number 11, this is ranking of firms with, this is for direct hire staffing services. So 28 firms bid. They ranked the top 3. This contract's for 5 years, total of $3.9 million, about $796,000 annualized, but it's based upon the usage. And so this is where we have temporary staffing and hires. Item number 13 is your 2023 Elite, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Long?
Yeah, back to this issue here of the direct hire staffing services. I am assuming that when we have openings or folks that are being hired in our leadership level of employees, that you would be talking with us, right? And this isn't all just going to happen in a void.
Well, these are temporary staffing services when we,
Oh, they're just temporary? Where did
yeah,
I
so,
miss that?
so, you know, when we have vacancies, we have people fill in. We use
Yeah,
this for a lot of administrative, and actually, that's a great way of trying people out, and then, you know, in turn, you may end up hiring them or not. So this is throughout the organization.
Do you know what our kind of high water level of what we've actually spent? I mean, because it's what, about $800,000 a year on the
Yeah,
upside?
Joe's not here, so I wouldn't, I really wouldn't have a clue.
Okay.
I can get that information to you, though.
Just curious how much
But-
we're spending on temporary.
But it is specific in here about executive level positions. It's in the first bullet point.
Well, I think that's not like department directors and things, but it is, they probably use them to target different types of engineer, you know, in different types of specialty areas. But I would have to follow up and ask exactly how we're using them.
I was
Yeah, if we could just get a little more for Tuesday, that would be great.
Yeah, I was just curious.
No, that's a good one. Commissioner Eggers? Microphone.
But this isn't for recruiting.
This is not a
This is just
recruiting.
a fill-in for,
Correct.
Yeah.
But they do, for like an engineer, they say, okay, go find us, you know, engineers. That's a specialty area where they would target that. But I'd have to get you more details on that, but let me follow up and,
All right.
and get you the exact way in which they use these services.
Thank you.
Item 13 is your elite event funding, as recommended by the Tourist Development Council, 30 events at $1.385 million.
I saw Steve walk in. Anyone have questions for Steve?
Yeah,
Commissioner Long?
well,
I think yeah.
he's over here,
He's there.
hiding behind the post.
well, and I hate to talk about the way things used to be, but it seems to me that we just don't hardly ever hear from the we've talked about this, Steve. I'm not saying anything we haven't already talked about way back when, but we don't ever get any updates on what's going on with that board, that agency, what they're working on, what their new focus is. Am I just missing it?
Well, we had Steve provide an update on strategic plan a few months ago. And then we have a joint TDC BCC meeting scheduled for November.
Right, but we
And we
had,
also, on the, you'll be getting information soon when we have a set date when the TDC CVB will be releasing the whole new branding and
that's
advertising
what I'm
plan for the
looking
next year.
for. What is our new theme? What is our new focus?
Do we have a date yet for that, Steve?
No, don't have a date for that yet. Commissioner Long, I actually have an appointment with you on Friday. Which
Okay, I'll say, I saw that on the calendar.
But I've been meeting with each of the commissioners just to go over some of those key things.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to do that a little more frequently, though, because I'm assuming that things keep changing in terms of how we are appealing to who we're hoping to entice to come here and who our competitors are and stuff like that.
And that's what he's going to kind of go over, and that will also feed into the strategic plan, that they're working on.
Commissioner Gerard?
A couple of questions, or question and a comment. The year that I was chair, I know that the evaluation committee was people that were on the board or on the committee, but I don't see that this year. What, are these staff people?
Yes, Commissioner. So in the guidelines, what we changed this year is how we would go through and review the applications for the different events. And what was recommended, that staff provide a recommendation back to the Tourist Development Council members on each of the events, and then have the TDC vote on that as a whole versus the TDC go through and evaluate each of the applications. Part of that is, from the staff expertise that we're able to pull in, plus our outside partners like BVK, like Destination Analyst, to go through and review everything to provide that back.
Okay, I'm not sure I agree with that, but.
I don't know if I agree with that either. I mean, it's just the whole dynamic of how they operate.
Yeah, it's a whole different.
From out here where I'm sitting, seems to have changed dramatically, and we don't ever get a report, we don't ever get an update, we don't know the only time I know what's going on with the CVB is when I get off the airplane and come into the airport. I see all the ads.
All of the data that is collected is available on our website. I have provided some updates during the commissioner committee updates during our regular sessions. But we'll have that branding exercise release coming up shortly, and that will give you the full year. Obviously, we haven't done some of those. This precedes me, but we haven't done those big kind of annual meeting informational events with COVID, but you'll be receiving more of that information as we move forward.
Commissioners,
Okay.
I did hear you, though, on that, and we talked about that. That's the reason we brought Steve in a few months ago, to give you an update in terms of the strategic plan and the things that they're working on. Those are not complete, but we brought in to provide that type of update. He's doing the one-on-ones now with you, and then we're going to come back to you when those type of items are finished, along with having the annual meeting. So we've tried to increase the frequency of which we have the direct discussions about the things that they're working on. And that was the attempt to do that.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Barry, I just don't see it. And we're coming off of almost 2 years of COVID-related issues, and I know that I certainly see it on the roads, that there are people here and they're coming from anywhere and everywhere, and you're out and about, and things are really congested, and I'm curious about the numbers and how they differ versus what they were before the pandemic, let's just say. And the reason I have my eyeball on that, Steve, and to everyone else who cares about it, is it directly impacts the decisions that are made by our transit and our transportation folks. And I think, you know, given where we are right now with all of the demands on our roads and on public transportation issues, we have to have more data. And yes, I know I can go to the website but you know, if I had to do that with every board I sit on, I'd be like crazier than I already am.
And he's going to be going through that in detail with you when he meets one-on-one. That was
Okay, well, I'm
that
gonna
was the
be
whole goal
quiet
for
then.
that.
Thank you.
Questions about the elite events? Commissioner Jordan?
Well, just that it seems like we have, and it has been a couple of years since I was chair, but like we have several new events that are being funded and then others that were being asked that have been funded in the past. And asking if the guidelines should be waived for things that we funded years and years and years. Sugar Sand Festival. I know we've gone back and forth about the MLK parade, but I think we should fund it. We should find a way to fund it. It's a big event. It's important to an awful lot of people in this community. And I hate that it's been cut out again. You know, they're not great at writing grants, but I think there's a way that we could.
Steve, you want to touch on the MLK? I know we've had conversations on that.
I agree.
And Commissioner, on that, regarding the MLK parade, we've actually sat with them and here recently, and we have another meeting that we are scheduling with them to see how we can make that happen. I agree with you, it is important to our community. And so let's find a way to go through it and make that happen. And so we're having that sit down to, you know, again, meeting directly with them. And then we would use that out of other dollars that we have.
So you think at the end of the day, we will find some way to support them financially?
Yes, yes, sir. And part of it is through that discussion of, again, like we look at other events, the, you know, sponsorship opportunities, the marketing opportunities, all of the things that we do with everybody else, we're going to have that sit down with them, you know, to go over what can we get. Maybe it's just not during that parade. Maybe it's over the next month, 2 months, you know, things along that line. But we are having those discussions.
The idea, I think, and Commissioner Eggers, I don't know if it transpired during your time, but was to have a professional, more clinical evaluation of the applications. Then it goes to the TDC, and the TDC has every ability to make a vote to waive rules or those kind of things, guidelines, and then it comes to the commission, and then the commission has a bite at the apple, and if this commission decides to waive guidelines, there's a process for that. I'm looking at the attorney. And so that's just each level of the process.
And a Category 4, which was added specifically for cultural heritage events. So it opened the door for consideration to things that don't necessarily have the data that shows heads and beds, just for this very purpose. I mean, and again, maybe we, you know, that amount wants to be more. It says $25,000, but I think assisting organizations like you're talking about see the opportunity. And maybe the next year or two, you actually start getting data about heads and beds, and it goes up in terms of the amount of dollars. But there is a category for that event, Steve. That's what was created for that, and other events around the county.
There used to be, yeah.
What's that?
I mean, there used to be. Is there not still a category for cultural events? Because I don't see the bacon and barbecue festival.
No, and actually, Commissioner Eggers, what we did this last year, because there was confusion on what constituted cultural or heritage, we just had Category 4. And on that, we removed some of the requirements that you had for Category 3, 2, and 1, which actually had more resources available. And then we created a new category called Category 5, and that was for new events in Pinellas County. that, had not been here before, but it was a way for them to get into this program so that we could, again, look at across the community what those things are, and then go through, and once they're, in the program, we'll have the research to be able to go back and say, yes, this is something we need to look at going forward, this is the category they would be in, but it gives them a chance to get, part of the program.
Further comments or questions? All right, hopefully, I think you all hear the consensus of where we want to go on that particular event.
Well, and again, it's a recommendation to the commission. Ultimately, it's your decision. Item 14 is memorandum of understanding with Pinellas County Schools for a shelter retrofit at Clearwater High School. This item, I think, is going to be ready for Tuesday. I've asked for additional staff information regarding the total budget we have for retrofits and things like that. So pending that, I may or may not ask that it be pulled. But we have $6.5 million set aside for shelter retrofits. This is 2.7. Obviously, if you had 10 schools, that doesn't fit within the budget. But this is a more extensive retrofit than the others would require. So I've asked for a total budget update before I make the recommendation.
Commissioner Long.
Okay, so I apologize if I beeped out when you started that last part where you were talking about the budget. Are you saying that we will have a next go around with the budget as well, or are you talking about staff?
No, I'm just talking about this item. This item we set aside, not in our budget, but in our penny, we set aside $6.5 million for shelter retrofits. This one item is 2.7.
Okay, I'm just double checking because I have something I want to talk about with my colleagues.
Did
About
they,
the budget.
I mean, that's a relatively new remodel, correct?
Yes. I don't know, Lourdes, you know the status of where it is?
Just curious if that was part of their remodel, if they're done with the remodel, or if they remodeled and now we're coming in right after a remodel to put something in.
I think that was an expansion on their site, but
Okay, just curious.
Lourdes Benedict, Assistant County Administrator. So actually, we knew about this because Kathy drove by Clearwater High and saw. So we need to do a better job with the school board to make sure that we know before projects happen. So some of this is retrofitting what's been done. And if you notice, I drove by there yesterday, it's beautiful, but it's all glass, right? So there's lots of things that we need to work on with this. And like Barry said, we do have $6.4 million for retrofitting. We have 10 other schools that we're working on as well. This one is the most extensive.
Just tell me we're not spending money
gym,
to
for
replace all those
example.
windows they just put in.
No, and please don't hear me say that.
Okay, all right. I just want to,
Gym, glazing the windows, screens, making sure that people can get to the restrooms if it's an open area.
the gym was not remodeled, was it?
I don't believe so.
So this is that's the type of detail that I've asked for.
okay. No, I didn't take it, but when I picture that school, that's what I picture, that giant wall of beautiful glass.
Yeah.
And Barry, you have that now. We can go over it on
That's
Wednesday.
that's an expansion area. I don't believe it involves the gym, but that's the type of information I've asked for.
This is more about the gym.
Well, let me point out that Tyrone Middle School is in the middle of being remodeled, a brand-new school in West St. Pete, and if that's on our radar anywhere for hardening,
Yeah,
it's about 6 blocks from my house, and I would like a safe place to go.
it's actually not on the list as of right now, schools.
Commissioner Long?
Yeah, well, this conversation makes me think that might it not be a good idea to invite the new superintendent to come and talk with us in one of our workshops about just new, his vision, his new ideas, so on and so forth? I think that would be
Absolutely.
a great,
We'll make that invitation.
And Kathy and I just met with him, I believe it was last week. And
yeah, but I'm talking
this, and it
about
was
us.
wonderful.
I mean,
Yes, and we could.
No, yeah, absolutely. We'll make that happen. I saw him last week at a chamber meeting, and obviously we'll let him get through this month of the first month of school. But yeah, we'll make that happen.
no, I want him right now. Just kidding. I was just kidding. I wasn't kidding about inviting him. I was kidding about right now.
Channel the Rolling Stones. Next item.
Item 15 is an annual agreement with the Sheriff's Office for our environmental lands deputies. see the thing. Item 16 is a grant application for design fees for the Dunedin Causeway. You can see the breakdown in your packet. Item 17 is another grant application. This is with the Federal Highway Administration for the replacement of Beckett Bridge in Tarpon Springs. As you can see, grant fund request is 90%, $18.9 million. County match 2.1, that'd come out of penny for Pinellas.
I don't know why I'm having all these questions today, but we can talk about it, Barry. But about that Dunedin Causeway Bridge, I mean, is that coming back to us at some point for further discussion? Are we still concerned about the dollars versus the number of folks going back and forth and whether or not, I mean,
Well,
that's the best use of public dollars? I'm just bringing it up
you're
because.
you're bringing up a big item that the discussion predates me. But you did pick a preferred alternate on that bridge design.
We did.
And so staff's direction is that until you change your mind, that's the direction we're going. So unless you're wanting to revisit that, that's,
Well, I'm just saying, that was quite some time ago, and we know a lot more today than we did back then about the dangers of the rising tide and the sea level and all of that. And there's about 300, and last I knew, about 300 and some odd folks that live out in that big condo at the end of the causeway. Isn't that right?
and a very large state park, but yes.
A very large state park. Well, I'm only,
Going to be building this with penny money. I mean, there's some penny money, but it's also, we're looking for grants for this, which would be federal grants or state grants that we worked. I mean, we're not going forward with this. So to the point about being a state park, I mean, it's clearly the largest park in the state as far as attendance goes. So, and you do have few people, I'm not going to say it's 300, maybe more than that live out there. So I think you're making a statement on a bridge that is obsolete. That's what we're talking about, an obsolete bridge versus, oh, maybe a bridge that still has 20 or 30 years of life left. So you're going to start abandoning areas out on our outer banks, so to speak? I don't think so.
well, if you were sitting on the Regional Planning Council and hearing some of their projections, you know, the length of that new bridge, were it to be built, there won't be any land out there, potentially. I'm just raising the question because it is a workshop.
We're going down the path that the board voted on, and so unless you change that, I don't know how to respond. That really is between the commissioners.
Commissioner Gerard.
Can you remind me what the total cost is that we settled, well, what it was when we voted on
I
it?
think it was 80,
It was 80 million?
give or take.
I think that's right.
There was
Heaven knows what it is
three
now.
choices and
Yeah, that was the most expensive.
right. But it was also, I think, with the understanding that if we didn't get federal money, this would be a very difficult project to complete.
Correct. Yeah, we couldn't do that on our own. And there were three options.
And it's probably 50% more by the time we get around.
And this is a mid-rise option, which still requires the gates and stuff versus the high-rise, so.
Okay, well, thank you for allowing me that.
Thank you. 18.
18, there we go. Amendment to the cooperative agreement between the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the Florida Forest Service, and the county for fire protection services to forest and wildlands within Pinellas County. This actually shrinks the amount of acreage because of development that has occurred. I guess it was last done in 2008, so our annual cost share goes down to a little over $2,000. Item 19 is a wastewater grant application with Florida Department of Environmental Protection. This is for the septic to sewer program. We have in our budget And under the ARPA funds, $10 million, this would request $10 million, providing a total of $20 million for this program.
Under item number 20, I'm requesting authority to initiate a foreclosure action. This is a property that has been through your code enforcement process. And back in July of this year, the special magistrate authorized foreclosure of the lien. I will report to you that subsequent to this item being put into the queue for the agenda, the property owner, through legal counsel, has requested that the special magistrate rehear the action that they took back in July authorizing foreclosure. You may or may not hear from that attorney on Tuesday asking that you not approve this. There is a reconsideration that will be occurring with the special magistrate on August the 29th. This is one of those cases where we have it here. We would request that you go ahead and grant authority. If we don't end up needing to file suit, meaning that these issues are resolved or we see a plan for them to be resolved, we would not go forward. You know, again, with some other cases I brought forward, giving us authority doesn't mean we will necessarily go forward. At the same time, you know, if the board wishes to put this off, that, you know, is not catastrophic to this case. I will tell you that the issues outstanding have been outstanding since 2020, and it involves a commercial establishment. So we're going to go ahead and request authority, but again, if you do hear a dispute over that, you know, it's not detrimental to the case ultimately, should you not provide that authority. And I do not anticipate any reports on Tuesday.
On the item 20,
Sure.
There's no backup information there. Is that something that we would get the information of the name of the establishment, at least maybe not the pages and pages of documents, but maybe a bullet sheet of what the issues were? And
I can get that for you. We don't normally include that level of detail in these types of items. I can tell you it is a bar. It's a bar. I can't tell you exactly where it's located. I can find that out. I'm told that power and electricity and a dance floor back at some time in the past were built without permits, which is of course troubling in a commercial establishment. There were site plan issues as well, including parking and some other things, and we just haven't seen any movement on that since 2020. So again, that's a safety concern, but I can get some additional information and have it prepared and either get it to you all in advance of the meeting or discuss it at the meeting. But I'll try to go ahead and get some bullet points on the business, you know, the business, where it's located, is it still open to the public with these outstanding issues, of course, would be the major concern given, you know, the electrical aspect certainly. But I can get some information like that prior to Tuesday.
And that wouldn't be something that we would shut down the business for safety reasons versus a foreclosure?
You know, it's not the way that we've gone with this. Again, this is something where we've been taking them through your normal process, which here was the special magistrate. We just have not been able, you know, again, to get the compliance that we've been seeking. And it was just July of this year that the magistrate did authorize us to move forward with a foreclosure, which is a necessary step in your process. And subsequent, it is a necessary step because what we're doing is we're foreclosing on liens that magistrate has imposed. And so it is a part of your process, you know, again, seeking to give everybody due process. You know, again, here what I'm hearing is that there was a request for a continuance by the party back when it wasn't granted by the magistrate, and now that there's a request for a reconsideration of prior action.
I guess maybe I'm not understanding the process part of it, but if you have a business that's not operating safely or violated rules or whatever, it's to say you can't operate that business until you get your act together versus we're taking your property. Those are very different thought processes to me, and I guess I'm not clear on have we done this before on a foreclosure?
We have been asked to step up foreclosure of properties where liens exist, and of course we're working with code enforcement staff on identifying properties, and this is one that was brought forward. I can certainly get information on the steps that have been taken, you know, to try to gain compliance. But this, again, is part of the initiative to bring forward some of these properties that are eligible for foreclosure, which of course are non-homesteaded residential properties, commercial properties.
Yeah, I mean, and we have talked about certainly the non-homesteaded residential that have been abandoned or, you know, not taken care of, and, you know, squallors and that kind of thing. But I don't remember ever talking about a commercial side of it. So it's just, ringing a little new to me, that's all.
I agree. I have the same concerns, so I'm glad you brought them up.
All right,
We'll get some additional information prior to Tuesday.
thank you. All right.
Moving on to public hearing items. Item number 24 is a resolution approving a one-year extension for the Safety Harbor CRA. They're going through the process now, but we didn't want it to expire, which would then trigger a whole new set of things that they have to do to reestablish it. This would reduce it, however, down to be in alignment with our policy at the 50% versus 95, but it gives them 1 year to complete all the steps necessary to request an extension. Okay. Item number 25 is a zoning change from R4, 1 and 2, 3 single family to general office. This is in Lowman. It's an area containing a variety of mixed uses, recommended approval, and no one has appeared in opposition. Item number 26 and 27 go together. This is a request for land use from residential office, 5.5 acres, and preservation to employment and preservation on that same acreage. The first portion is the land use piece, second portion is the zoning. Again, on this, the proposed use is still light manufacturing processes, and it really wouldn't change the footprint of the building. No one has appeared in opposition, and no correspondence has been received.
So it's residential and office piece to the employment piece, because
That's correct.
Preservation's staying the same.
Preservation staying the same, that's correct.
Okay, all right. And okay, got it. Thank you.
And I'd have to get staff to
That's
answer
fine.
why
That's
they're
fine.
going through that.
That's fine.
But yeah, so item 26 is the land use portion, 27 is the zoning piece. Item number 28 is our county application. This is for Rainieri Park. So this is change of zoning from residential plan unit and preservation to facility-based recreation on the site. And no one has opposed. And that concludes the agenda.
As of today, I don't believe we have any Skyway. Do we have a Skyway? I don't think we have any Skyway lightings. Any commissioner have new business to bring? Commissioner Peters. Microphone?
Oh, there it is. It was the Coast Guard's birthday, and for years I've taken birthday cakes to the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard is the largest military, it's not really military, organization that we have in the county. So we have 4 stations, and a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people that live in this county don't realize that we have 500 coasties stationed at Air Station. Air Station is the largest air station in the country. We have Sand Key, we have Sector, which is the dispatch for the whole eastern seaboard, the Caribbean, and the Turks and Caicos, located in St. Petersburg. And then the Coast Guard Reserve is located right next to Air Station. And reserves, last I had anything to do with the coasties coming in and out through that station, they were in Kuwait, rebuilding Kuwait. And so we have hundreds of Coast Guard men and women that service in this county, and we never really do anything to recognize, serve, or, we do lots of things for veterans. We do lots of things for active military, but we do very little for the Coast Guard. And so at one point, the Chamber of Commerce got the city of Clearwater designated Coast Guard city, but then the chamber went through changes, and then they stopped interacting with the Coast Guard, and so they lost that designation. And that was a big deal because it was the 12th designation ever done in the United States. And so I don't know what it is, but I would like us to consider things that we could do on a regular basis that could honor our Coast Guard. I think it's a big deal. We do have the reserves of the Congressman Bill Young, but other than that, all we really have here is the Coast Guard, and it's a big deal. So
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I saw some of the celebrations happening over the last recent period of time. City of St. Pete did have something at City Hall, the mayor, and I saw your posts, and actually it was on my list to talk to staff about how we should have a better connection and relationship. So I couldn't agree with you more. And we'll take steps to make that happen.
Okay, I don't know what it looks like. Barry had a couple ideas, and I don't even remember what they were now, but, sorry. Sorry.
They were just that good. They were just that good.
I had a lot going on, but he did have a good idea, even if it's working with partners to, the Threshers Field invites them and the Rowdies invite them, but to attend. But back when I was at the chamber, we used to get extra things so that they could do merit things. So if somebody did something above and beyond, they would get extra tickets. So they would do things like that. But I don't know what it is, but I would really like something to be. I would like this
Sure.
to be more of a priority for us in the county.
Absolutely. Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, I totally, 100% agree with you. It is a part of our military branches, but this is in our county.
Right.
And I think to your point, it needs more recognition and more upgrade. But every time, we have an event, whether it's, you talk about the 5 different, now 6 different, because you have the Space Force, the 6 different branches of government, Coast Guard's included. But we don't focus on that. And I think that's a great idea. So glad you're looking into that.
Commissioner Long.
Well, I would just like to chime in and say I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for bringing that forward, Commissioner. That said, I do think it begs for a larger discussion about bringing in all, if we're going to recognize the Coast Guard, let's not forget about that Joint Readiness Command Center, because they hold in there all of the members of the military, and I'm more familiar with that than I ever wish I could have been, because that's where my son was deployed to Iraq from way back when. So I've spent a lot of time over there, and I think if we're going to do that, we ought to look at something we can do that includes the Coast Guard. They have a great program in some of our schools as well. I think there's a lot that we could be doing. We just haven't put it on our radar.
Mr. Burton.
To remind the commissioner, so what I had suggested is to have a first Friday and invite area mayors and leadership along from the Coast Guard. And the reason I say that is something that was at a previous place where they were able to interact. So some of the smaller issues that people are having, they have an issue with housing, or they have an issue with whatever it is, law enforcement or whatever. They have chances to interact on not a grand scale, but on an individual, but with the various leadership in the Coast Guard. It's a way to bring people together in a more informal setting and be able to have some frank conversations about difficulties they have, and also get access to for people that can help resolve some of the issues. So that was what I said as an addition. But and I think that would be that's one thing that we could do in addition to the recognition that makes a big difference, because it solves real problems.
Commissioner?
Yeah, and I know several years ago we talked about, or I talked about bringing, we have all these boards and committees, and I know in the city of Dunedin, I just recently heard, because they had a Purple Heart ceremony, that they've created an armed forces committee made up of residents that are either members of these armed forces or just residents at large that talk about that central focus of that's their central focus, to see what can the city do more for them. And I know we talked about that before. So whether it's through the mayor's council or whether it's through just to collaborate with our partners to figure out how to raise them up. I think there is an argument to be made that we can get residents involved in this, because you've got a lot of passion from a lot of groups. So anyway, just a thought as to how we keep it centrally focused all the time, because we have so many other things that
Sure.
we're moving around on. So thanks.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned.